Chapter 11, Part 1, Depreciation and Impairment. So determining depreciation expense, we have to always answer the following questions. What is the cost? Which is all costs associated with getting it ready for its intended purpose. Next, what's the salvage value? What is the resale value at the end of the service life? Next, what is the service life? How long will the business use the equipment? What is the date of purchase? Affects the first year of depreciation for some methods. That's why we always have to check this. What is the depreciable base? The maximum amount of expense that can be allocated over the asset's life, which is always the cost minus the salvage value. What is the depreciation method should we use? And it all depends what best matches the use of the equipment. Allocating methods. Methods we use for depreciation. The key is it has to be systematic and rational. So we have the activity method, always used whenever something is based on units. So an example might be if you buy a car, it might be mileage, if that's the best case, particularly if it's used for sales. The other might be a piece of equipment where you're producing units, and it might depend on the units or the hours. Straight line. This is most commonly used because it gives you the lowest depreciation in the first year, which a lot of times they want because it's also the easiest method and it gives you the best bottom line. Then we have accelerated methods such as sum of the year's digits and declining balance, and these are used if you get most of the benefit at the beginning of the asset's life. And then we have our hybrid methods, which are group and composite methods, and hybrid or combination methods. Now, another issue is what happens if we buy it at other than the first day of the year? Well, we have a couple options here. The one we're going to be using is the nearest month, which if purchased during the year, if the date is between the 1st and the 15th, you get the whole month. So if you buy it on January 1st, you get 12 months. If you buy it on January 16th, you only get 11 months in the first year. Another method is called the half-year convection, and in that method, you can use that. It doesn't matter when you buy it, you just take a half a year in the first year and a half a year in the last year. Then we have the nearest fraction, which you take the days remaining in the year divided by 365 in the first year, and the days you used it in the last year divided by 365. And then you can get the full year, which means that it doesn't matter when you bought it, you take a full year in either the first year, and then you get none in the last year, or you take none in the first year and you get all of it in the last year. So you can use any of those methods. So let's take a look at an example, and again, this is partial year, and in this case, what we're going to do is look at depreciation expense and accumulated depreciation, and we're going to look at straight line, activity method, sum of the year's digits, and double declining balance. And then, of course, what we want to do is pay attention to what information do we need. So we need what did it cost us? Does it have a salvage value? What is its service life in years and units? Because we're going to do both methods. And also, when did we buy it? So a summary of that is our total cost is $117,900. Our service life is 5 years or 21,000 units. We have a salvage value of $12,900, and we bought it on August 1st, so that means we're going to get 5/12 whenever we consider partial year when determining depreciation expense. So first, let's look at straight line. Here, our formula is going to be cost minus salvage value, also known as depreciable base, divided by service life is going to give us our annual depreciation. So in this case, it's $21,000 if we bought it between the 1st and the 15th, or we use the full year method. We'd use $21,000. But if we don't, our depreciable base is going to be $105. So now we can do our depreciation expense and accumulated depreciation. So the first year, we're going to take our $21,000. And we do have to consider months when we're doing straight line. We're going to take it times 5/12, and that gives us $87.50, and that's going to be our accumulated depreciation. And to get net book value, we're going to take our cost minus accumulated depreciation. Our second year, we're going to get a full year, our third, fourth, and fifth, but since we got a partial year in the first year, we're going to drag it out to the sixth year where we get that 7/12. But the thing to pay attention to is that if you notice, in the last year, our accumulated depreciation equals our depreciable base, and our net book value equals our salvage value. Now our activity method. Here what we're going to do is it's cost minus salvage value divided by total estimated usage over its life. In this case, it's 21,000 hours, and we get a rate of $5 per hour. So all we have to do is take the actual usage to get our depreciation expense for each year. When we use units of activity, we do not care when it is bought because it's usage that determines, not the month we bought it. So it's the units or the hours that are going to affect it. In this case, it's hours. Now, sum of the year's digit. This one's a little trickier. The first thing we need to do is determine the fraction for each year. So first, we have to figure out our bottom factor. And in this case, you can do it one of two ways. You can either add up the years. In this case, since it's 5 years, be 5 plus 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1, giving us 15. Or what we can do is take the years plus 1 divided by 2 to give us our factor, or in our case, 5 times 5 plus 1 divided by 2, or 30 divided by 2 gives us 15. So if you notice, we get the same number. So to get our fraction, it's going to be the years remaining divided by the factor. So this is what it would look like if we bought it at the beginning of the year and we didn't have a partial year. It would be, year 1 would be 5/15 times the depreciable base. Year 2 would be 4/15 times the depreciable base, and so on. However, since we have a partial year, then you must carry forward to the next year the remaining months at that fractional rate. So here's what it looks like based on the purchase. We purchased this on August 1st. So year 1, we get 5/15 times 5 months divided by 12. For year 2, we carry forward that 5/15 and take it times 7/12 with the remainder of that first year. And then for year 2, we take 4/15 times 5/12. And then we do the same thing for year 3. We take those 7 months at 4/15, and then we take 3/15 times 5/12. So now let's take a look at the problem to see how we would determine our depreciation each year. So for year 1, it's going to be 105,000 times 5/15 times 5 months divided by 12. And that would give us a depreciation expense, our accumulated depreciation, and our net book value. For year 2, what we're going to do is we're going to take 5/15 of the 105 times 7/12 plus 105 times 4/12 times the remaining months of 5/12, which gives us a total of 32,084. Then we're going to do 2018. We're going to carry forward that 4/15 for 7 months, and then we're going to use the new factor, fraction of 3/15 times the 5/12 for the remaining of the year, giving us a total depreciation of 25,083. We're going to use that, do the same thing for 2019, and then for 2020, and then for that last year, we're going to take 1/15 at that the remaining 7/12. And if you notice in the year, last year, our accumulated depreciation equals 105,000, and our net book value is 12,900. So the key here is you got to keep carrying that fraction forward. The last one we're going to look at is double declining balance. The rate is always going to be the years divided by 1 times 2 equals the depreciable rate times the cost. So in our case, the rate is 40%. Depreciation expense is always going to be the net book value times the rate times the months and cannot exceed the depreciable base. Now you only care about the months in the first year. So in our example, we're going to take 117,000, again, that is the cost because it's the first year, times 40% times 5/12. So that gives us depreciation expense of 19,650 and accumulated depreciation of 19,650. Now, for the next year, we're going to subtract accumulated depreciation from the cost times 40%, and that's going to give us 39,300. Our accumulated depreciation is 58,950 because we're going to take that 39,300 plus last year's accumulated depreciation. And now we can do our new depreciation. So again, remember, it's always net book value each year up to our depreciable base. So remember that we can only depreciate, even though we don't take into consideration at the beginning, we must take it into consideration the last month is we must adjust for the salvage value. Now, what happens if we have an asset impairment? Well, we have to do our test, which is we need to determine if the expected future net cash flows are less than the carrying amount. If no, there is no impairment. If yes, we have to do test 2, which is we need to compare the fair market value to the carrying value to determine impairment loss. Now, the other thing we must consider is the asset being held for usage? Then we determine the new depreciation rate, but we cannot restore the impairment loss. If it's held for sale, then we can up to the original write-off. So let's look at an example. So in this case, we bought a piece of equipment for $10 million, and it had an 8-year with no salvage value. And then it was determined that new technology had affected it, and now we're saying that the future cash flows are only going to be $6.3 million, and the fair value is 5.6, and that the remaining life is 4 years. So what does that mean? So first, we're going to compare the net book value to the future cash flows. And in our case, 2 years have gone by, so we have a net book value of $7.5 million. We now are going to compare that to the future cash flows, which are less than the $7.5 million. So that means that we may have an impairment. So in this case, the net book value is $7.5 million. The fair market value is 5.6. So that means we have an impairment, which means we must do a write-down. And at the end of December 2018, the estimated value is 5.9. However, we are going to write off our depreciation because we're using this in a business. So we're going to take 4 into our 5.6 million. However, since we're depreciating it, we cannot write it down. Now, what happens if we have the impairment, but at the end of 2018, we decided in 2017 that we are not going to use it, and we're just going to sell it as soon as we can. Because we haven't used it, we can write it up, and this would be our journal entry. And that ends this section.